is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Thursday, January 30th, 2025. My name is Emma Vigeland, in for Sam Seder, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Erik Baker, author of Make Your Own Job, How the Entrepreneurial Work Ethic Exhausted America. And later in the show, Teresa Romero, president of the United Farm Workers, joins us to talk about the Trump administration terrorizing some of our most essential workers. Also on the program today, no survivors are expected after an American Airlines plane collided with an Army helicopter over the Potomac, the deadliest aviation disaster in the U.S. since 9/11. This comes after Trump's hiring freezes, which included air traffic controllers, and the gutting of a top aviation safety committee. More on that in a second. Trump signs the Laken-Riley Act, says he plans to put 30,000 migrants in a camp in Guantanamo Bay. He also revokes the temporary protected status for 600,000 people from Venezuela, opening them up to deportation. Trump then signed an executive order directing the federal government to revoke student visas for Hamas sympathizers, whatever that means. Senate aides tell the press that Tulsi Gabbard may not have the votes to move her nomination forward. Trump's QAnon-believing pick for FBI Director Kash Patel, author of one of my favorite books, I have it here on my desk, The Plot Against the King, has his confirmation hearing today. Maybe this will come up. I don't know.
Gotta get you reading older people's books.
No.
Before bedtime.
Meta will pay $25 million to Donald Trump in a settlement over his lawsuit against them for suspending his account after January 6th.
Shakedown.
Yep. I think it was it CBS? One of the other, it may not have been CBS, but another media organization did something similar.
Reminder, Zuckerberg wanted to keep it up, but a bunch of his staff said, we don't want to run the platform where the leader of the country says, when the looting starts, the shooting starts.
Yes, that's right. Speaking of bribes, though, disgraced Democratic Senator Bob Menendez gets 11 years in prison and praises Trump in his press conference afterwards. He's doing an Eric Adams, who, by the way, the DOJ is considering dropping the case against him. Israel's ban on UNRWA working in Gaza takes effect today, effectively eliminating its ability to provide aid. And lastly, Israel arrests 12 Palestinians for celebrating the release of Palestinian hostages. The only democracy in the Middle East, folks. All this and more on today's program. Welcome to the show, everybody. It's an EmMajority Report Thursday. Bradley's remote today. It's just myself and Matt. So if we're a little, Matt's doing 2 jobs, running around, I guess rolling around in that rolly chair back there.
Squiddly Diddly, I think, is the reference of the guy, the drumming octopus that sort of has 8 arms going in different directions, and that's who I feel like when I'm running solo.
So double credit to Matt today for that. Also because I sent you like 18 links to pull up before the show. But I mean, I guess I'm just like, this aviation disaster is just really seismic. And for those who don't know, last night, the Reagan National Airport outside of Washington, D.C., there was an American Airlines flight coming from Wichita, Kansas, and it collided with an Army Black Hawk helicopter over the Potomac River. The helicopter, it appears, was on a training flight. And as I said in the headlines, it's the deadliest aviation disaster in U.S. airspace since 9/11. Now, in total, it's believed that there were 64 people on board the passenger jet and 3 on the Army helicopter. Some of the folks on this Kansas flight were figure skaters and their coaches and families returning from a training camp. Both U.S. citizens and also some Russian citizens as well. Now, we can't make a causal connection to any one factor at this moment. I want to be clear about that because the information is still coming out. But we do have 2 overarching themes about, at the very least, how the United States relates to aviation and transportation safety in this country. And one is a bit deeper. The first, that first reason really is that Reagan National Airport is overly congested. If we could pull up the Washington Post article here, they did a good job this morning of breaking some of this down. This congestion is a problem of really just slowly building up to putting more flights going through this airport. The Washington Post article explains here at the beginning. The airspace along the Potomac River where an Army helicopter and an airliner crashed Wednesday night poses some of the most complex challenges in the country for pilots, requiring them to rely on layers of procedures and electronic safeguards to avoid a catastrophe. If we could just scroll down to that first or second paragraph here. Military Coast Guard helicopters frequently fly low over the river, sharing the skies with planes on the heavily used takeoff and landing routes for Washington's Reagan National Airport. Congestion in the skies and on runways and taxiways around the airport has raised safety concerns for years. National was built to handle 15 million passengers annually. It now handles 25 million. And keep going because there's a little bit more I wanted to get to in terms of the context. Lawmakers proposed in 2023 to add more flights at National to serve new long-distance routes. Opponents of the idea raised questions about safety. Last year, as part of legislation to fund the FAA, Congress added 5 round-trip flights. The decision came over objections of members of the D.C. area congressional delegation who have long argued that the airport is at capacity. U.S. airlines have had a strong safety record in recent years, with the last mass casualty crash occurring in 2009. Federal aviation officials have scrambled to respond to a spate of near collisions at airports around the country that began in 2023. Industry leaders said they were a warning sign that there was a risk of a crash as air traffic bounced back from pandemic-era lows. The FAA has investigated at least 3 close calls at National in recent years. 2 occurred in quick succession last year, heightening concerns. In one, air traffic controllers instructed a Southwest jet to cross a runway while a JetBlue plane was starting its takeoff roll down the same runway. In the second incident, an American Airlines jet preparing for takeoff nearly collided with a King Air plane that was landing on a shorter runway nearby. The FAA was investigating both incidents. Now, this fight goes back to also it's the gradual increase of flights at this particular airport. Again, this is the airport that like our lawmakers fly through. So their incentives are both personal and then also related to wanting more flights to the areas that they represent. This article from Maryland Matters about this was really interesting. This is the bottom section, Matt. Yep. They go back to this FAA reauthorization fight in 2024 when these DC area lawmakers from Virginia and Maryland were fighting back. Opponents said Washington National, also called DCA, already strains to safely handle the current level of air traffic in and out of the airport. Adding flights will only worsen the safety environment, they said. But lawmakers from outside the D.C. area argued that additional flights would be a positive. Representative Hank Johnson, Democrat of Georgia, said they would add connectivity and economic expansion. It should be noted, by the way, that Georgia, Atlanta, huge aviation hub, one of the biggest airports in the country. So that's probably related here.
I mean, and that's the thing, is that connectivity and economic expansion. Yeah, we're a growing country, actually. There's a, I mean, I guess that's a Democrat saying that, so I can't even hit him on the small government thing. We need to be expanding the safety things of this first, and stop just expecting the benevolence of growth to cure all problems.
And like, look, this is also, it's a Republican House at this time, so they lead the committees and they decide what's going to be added to the FAA authorization. So it's still tilted towards the Republicans, but yeah, that Democrat saying that is extremely depressing. Representative Burgess Owens, Republican of Utah, also applauded the extra flights. This legislation was designed not for one airport or one airline, but for all of us, he said. It gives more convenience, more opportunities to families traveling into Washington, D.C. The 5 new routes have not been selected, but some members, including Senator Ted Cruz, Republican of Texas, who is the ranking member on the Senate committee that oversees aviation. By the way, now that the Republicans took back the Senate, he is the leader, have speculated that San Antonio could be one beneficiary. And by the way, that's what happened.
Gives opportunities to families? No, you guys want more flights into where you work.
Exactly. And, they're responding to industry, and they're hearing, I think, from these airlines, this is how the sausage gets made. There was and then this article cites this analysis from Temple University's Fox School of Business, where they found that transportation committee chairs saw flights to their districts increase by more than 5% on average from 1990 to 2019. The analysis, which was published last year in the academic journal Organization Science, also showed that airlines increase direct service to Washington, D.C. From a chair's district. The numbers generally reverted to normal after the chair's term. So this is how this works. And that's the overall, systemic, bipartisan, frankly, problem that we're seeing here. But then we have the short-term story that's related directly to Donald Trump and Elon Musk. Now, so this is an article from The Verge pointing this out from this morning, that Elon Musk pushed out the head of the FAA ahead of Donald Trump taking office. Musk has publicly clashed with the FAA and its former chief, Michael Whitaker. Now, Whitaker stepped down just before Trump's inauguration in anticipation of being fired, and now the FAA doesn't have a permanent leader at this current moment because Elon Musk had tweeted something about him. Just scroll down a little bit here, Matt. Michael Whitaker stepped down as FAA administrator on January 20th, the day of Donald Trump's inauguration, after clashing with Elon Musk, whose company SpaceX is regulated by the agency. Musk publicly called on Whitaker to resign after the FAA fined SpaceX for failing to get approval for launch changes. And now the power vacuum at the agency is coming into sharp focus after an Army helicopter collided with an American Airlines jet Wednesday evening in Washington, D.C., killing everyone on board. So we have that. And
we should also note that after the election, but also before it, and just made less noise, planes had to be turned back because this guy was firing rockets off when they were re-entering the atmosphere. This guy is a threat to your safety in all of these places. And I mean, talked a lot about what he's doing in Texas, and sort of space. It's space pollution, literally. It's something that Neil deGrasse Tyson was talking about back in 2008 of we're putting up so much stuff in the skies, and some of it just falls back down to Earth. This stuff is literally causing flights to turn around.
He wants to have his cosmic playhouse essentially, and not have a nagging bureaucracy that would say maybe you shouldn't put this amount of junk into space because it could fall and kill people, or the bureaucracy that might say no, we shouldn't have this many flights going into this busy of an airport that initially was only supposed to have 15 million flights a year, and now nearly doubled at 25 million. So that was on Inauguration Day. Same day, Trump announced hiring freezes, which, by the way, included air traffic controllers and airplane workers. So then January 22nd, Democrats, Representative Steve Cohen and Larson put out this statement. This is number 2. Yeah. Ranking members Larson Cohen's statement on Trump's dangerous freeze of air traffic control hiring. That was 2 days later, January 22nd, 2025. And now, January 29th, the evening of, what do you know? What happened? There was an incredible disaster. We don't know for certain that that's exactly what happened, but we do have this from a reporter of Mother Jones, who said last night, was literally talking to the union representing federal air traffic controllers earlier today about how there's already a major shortage of air traffic controllers, and the resignation offers they just got from OPM could seriously endanger public safety. And last night we saw what happens when the government doesn't work. So again, it's too early to draw causal connections, I think. Although
but the
I think
elements are pretty clear.
The elements are pretty clear. And the original part of what I'm saying about the increase in these flights to this airport, clearly, I think, is a major issue that's independent of the second piece of the Trump administration's influence on this. But even if you can't draw a causal connection to these hiring freezes and to what that Mother Jones reporter was saying, and to the dysfunction that Donald Trump has created, know that this is what their vision is for the future. With Project 2025 and vote and the dismantling of the administrative state, the people that make our travel safe, the people that make our food safe, the people that inspect the drugs that we're ingesting into our bodies, they want those folks all gone so that the billionaires don't have to deal with the cumbersome burden of having to actually provide people products and services that don't kill us all. And that is the goal of the Trump administration, to loot the administrative state and give free rein to those very industries that they already serve. So regardless of I also should say the other theory is that it was DEI. Duh.
It turns out you need to have priorities, and we're not going to be able to have just infinite growth without attending to safety and infrastructure that's going to allow that, and like infinite military sort of maneuvers flying around because we're all of a sudden reopening Guantanamo to start concentration camps. It turns out we can't do all the above, and we don't like Pete Buttigieg here politically, and a big problem with him. But I'll just say, fixing bread prices for a consulting agency applies a little bit more than being an MTV Christian like Sean Duffy now, who is the transportation secretary. These guys are jokers, and to hear them come say we're looking into it, like I what a joke this entire, and Elon Musk firing these people, what a joke this administration is.
I mean, they're already going to blame DEI. It doesn't matter. It won't even matter if the identity
they're going to make DEI popular.
They're repeating it over and over again, which the Democrats could learn from. I mean, God. With the level of repetition that the Republicans engage in terms of messaging, they say the same thing over and over again, and how stupid it is, but it's still able to get across. Can you imagine if we had that same kind of discipline with the Democratic Party? But it's all a coalition of never Trumpers all the way up to the squad, and there's no consistency on anything. And they're still just like struggling to respond and meet this moment. And I'm hoping that the reaction, like, I think Trump overreached with that. I'm going to shut down the government that he did yesterday. And I'm not sure if you guys, I'm sure you talked about it quite a bit.
Yep.
But the fact that there isn't a blitz of Democratic Party spokespeople saying the exact same thing right now about Donald Trump endangering Head Start and SNAP, necessary things that feed and educate people in our society and the turbulence that cause, it's a failure. And like, for all of our sakes, they have to get it together and figure out a way to actually attack this administration.
And one final point before we get to our first guest in the ads, but the people are already there. The people sense of urgency from and I'm not just talking about like, far left people that are always sort of keyed up on this stuff. I'm talking about normie people too. They are desperate for any sort of sign that there's urgency and not the complacency that has, sentenced us to where we're at now.
100%. All right, folks. We are going to get to Erik in just a second, but first, a word from one of our sponsors. Sam waxes poetically about Factor. I don't have kids, so I'm maybe have a little bit more time to make my meals, but I still like Factor. Sam really appreciates it because time is of the essence, and the meals are something that his kid actually likes, even though we know that a little bit of a picky eater sometimes, kids tend to be. Factor helps optimize your nutrition this year and your family's. Factor has chef-made gourmet meals that make eating well easy. They're dietitian approved and ready to heat and eat in 2 minutes, so you can fuel right and feel great no matter what life throws at you. We want to thank Factor for supporting the Majority Report. Factor lets you do you. Factor arrives fresh and fully prepared, perfect for any active, busy lifestyle. Get started at factormeals.com/majority50off. That's one word. And use code majority50off to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. Lose up to 8 pounds in 8 weeks with Factor Keto Meals. Based on a randomized controlled clinical trial with Factor Keto, results will vary depending on diet and exercise, but with 40 options across 8 dietary preferences on the menu each week, it's easy to pick meals tailored to your goals. Choose from preferences like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, or Keto. Factor can help you feel your best all day long with wholesome smoothies, breakfast, grab-and-go snacks, and more add-ons. Reach your goals this year with ingredients you can trust and convenience that cannot be beat. Eat smart with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/majority50off and use code majority50off to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's code majority50off at factormeals.com/majority50off to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. All right, folks, quick break. And when we come back, we will be speaking to Erik Baker about his book, Make Your Own Job, How the Entrepreneurial Work Ethic Exhausted America. We are back, and we are joined now by Erik Baker, historian, lecturer in the History of Science Department at Harvard University, and author of Make Your Own Job, How the Entrepreneurial Work Ethic Exhausted America. Erik, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
So, what is America's culture of entrepreneurialism, right? How far back does it go? How do you characterize what it entails?
Yeah, so this is kind of something that a lot of people think of as sort of American as apple pie. America and entrepreneurship go hand in hand. But actually, it's surprising how recent in some ways this idea is, and in particular, I argue that it represents a major change in the way that Americans have thought about why you're supposed to work. What makes working good. So I distinguish between a variety of different work ethics. People talk about the Protestant work ethic and other kinds of ways of sort of formulating the work ethic. And what I want to say is that at the time that people first started talking about entrepreneurship, and especially about being entrepreneurial, being an entrepreneurial person in the early 20th century, This was a response to changes in the structure of the economy that made it so that those old work ethics didn't really make sense anymore, because in many cases people were confronting a scarcity of work. We talk about deindustrialization in the Rust Belt in the last 50 years, but you see similar phenomena going back to that kind of Gilded Age period. So now you instead, to explain to people why they need to work, what makes working good, it's not just about putting your head down and doing the work that you're supposed to do, but there's an element of creation that needs to be involved, making work for yourself and for others. So that's kind of how I frame what distinguishes what I call the entrepreneurial work ethic from other work ethics.
So this precedes basically post-industrialization, which that would not have been my guess before I read what you wrote. I would have assumed that a lot of this kind of comes in with the ushering in of the neoliberal era, but you point to the crisis of joblessness that came out of the Great Depression. Can you expand a little on how that had an effect on this entrepreneurial ethic you describe?
Yeah, so again, I think it's true that a lot of these ideas do feel super recent. People like Elon Musk and whoever, they frame themselves as doing something kind of totally new. But that's part of the shtick, the entrepreneurial sort of self-branding. We're doing something no one's ever done before. But in reality, this rhetoric has been around for a long time, and it kind of comes in cycles. That's what I noticed in doing the research for this book. So in moments where, again, for example, in the depths of the Great Depression, where you have, employment in some cases, thinking almost a quarter of the entire workforce out of work, this kind of old rhetoric of, well, you just need to, put your head down and do your job and don't complain. That's not really appealing if you don't have a job to do. And so, of course, for a lot of people in circumstances like that, they get involved in political organizing. The Congress of Industrial Organizations, the CIO, was founded in this period. The Communist Party membership swelled. But then at the same time, you also had a lot of people who were very concerned by those developments, who were saying, oh, no, in order to get back on your feet, you don't need policy changes, you don't need collective organizing, but everyone still has the ability to, in the titular slogan, make your own job, even when times are tough.
It's also, in the modern sense, it's bipartisan in the way that, the Harris campaign in particular, I think to its detriment, made this small business owner thing a fixture of the campaign, and Democrats then lost the lowest income bracket for the first time since the 1960s, and but like the small business thing, I've been hearing since I can remember paying attention to politics, and it is both sides of the aisle.
Yeah, that's completely right, and one of the things that I think makes our kind of worship of entrepreneurship so stubborn is the way that it has this kind of almost magical ability to kind of be all things to all people. So Republicans have a version of entrepreneurship that's all about family and small communities and restoring the kinds of traditional bonds that have been destroyed by newfangled moral values. But liberals also have their own version of entrepreneurship that's exactly the opposite. It's about progress and about kind of creative solutions to social problems, and that's really, really thoroughly embedded in the DNA of the modern Democratic Party. This idea that we're the Democrats, so we care about poverty, we care about inequality, but also we can't do anything too socialist about it. So instead, we have this kind of magic wand called entrepreneurship that's able to fix these problems without any kind of invasive big government action.
Well, I think when you put it like that, it just shows how right-wing our politics are compared to like a normal political spectrum, when the Democrats and the Republicans are both privileging the idea of private entrepreneurship over even, the rights of workers elevating. And of course, the Democrats do that more than the Republicans, but it should be a starker contrast than that. And it does feel like, not to make it a cultural pathology, because that's reductive and silly, but you did mention like the idea of the Protestant work ethic, and that mythology, I think, at the very least, plays a role. Could you explain why I'm right or wrong on that front?
Yeah, totally. So there is, there is a deep cultural tradition in America of valorizing hard work for its own sake, and that's clearly in some ways the soil that a lot of these ideas sprung from. But it also requires work to again kind of reformulate these ideas to make sense to people. We all have a cultural inheritance, ideas that we grew up with. We also have the ability to challenge them, to decide that they don't make sense anymore. So, I really see the history of entrepreneurialism that I tell in this book is a story of almost kind of give and take, a certain kind of dance between working people who do have these ideas about working, the importance of working hard. You're rewarded for persevering and all of this, and groups of people, whether they're managers, business school professors, self-help writers, who are trying to kind of rebrand these ideas or kind of keep them in fashion when there are sort of worrying signs that these ideas aren't resonating, or they're not kind of doing their the kind of ideological work they're supposed to do.
Self-help books, you spend a good amount of time on that in your book, which they're definitely a pet peeve of mine. So it really. Can you talk about that phenomenon and the outgrowth of self-help books? I mean, is that a new phenomenon that matches up with this timeline? Because there were etiquette books, I feel like, prior to this, directed at women to be desirable and men to be gentlemanly. That's the closest analogy I can think to the modern self-help industry, but it's more capitalistic than that.
Yeah, I mean, it's. You can find, I would, in some ways, I think the origins of advice literature, I mean, this is a really ancient phenomenon. The book of Proverbs in the Bible, there's, all kinds of, instruction. If you want to be, rich and happy, these are the kinds of things you need to do. So in that sense, it's not a new thing. What I emphasize is that the rise of the entrepreneurial work ethic leads to a new kind of almost sort of common sense, a new sort of kind of common set of themes in self-help writing that emphasize especially the importance of, in their probably the best-selling self-help book of the 20th century is The Power of Positive Thinking by Norman Vincent Peale, who presided over the president's first reading. But this idea, the key to success has to do with the kinds of thoughts that we think, and in particular about sort of not responding to obstacles with sort of a belief that you can kind of create new opportunities to move past them. That's an idea that is a little more modern. You start to see it at the end of the 19th century, the beginning of the 20th century, and so much of self-help literature to this day, even sometimes when it's in a more kind of highbrow scientific, sort of psychological idiom, that's still the core message.
And what do you make of this? Honestly, this phenomenon of really mass, I would say, speculation among the population, whether it be cryptocurrency or gambling. I repeat this stat all the time, but the proliferation of sports gambling has caused more debt amongst young men in states where it's legal than in states where it's not. I think that's almost an ideological child of what you're describing, where it's like, be your own entrepreneur, be your own speculator.
Yeah. Well, another thing that's kept the entrepreneurial work ethic in circulation is that it's it's a work ethic that admits the truth that a lot of work sucks, which is very different from the kind of more traditional, when people think about the Protestant work ethic. It says all work is good. Entrepreneurship actually says a lot of work is bad. It's kind of
it's a grind.
crushing.
The grind.
It's a grind. Yeah.
The grind. Yeah.
And it's precarious. You can't trust it. You always got to be looking out for the next thing. And so I think in a lot of ways this resonates with people, and so they say, okay, so if you have some kind of terrible job, the question is what do you do about it? And entrepreneurship is a way to say, well, instead of taking a more political response, that you can be your own boss. If you just trade crypto or get rich on FanDuel, you can get out of the shitty job and but still sort of have access to all the virtues that we attach to success and work and everything in our culture.
So why does it persist despite the returns not matching the promises? And why does it persist across class lines, frankly?
Yeah, well, so something I say in the book is that I think this ideology, in some ways, the miracle of it is that it feeds on its own failure. So there's in some ways the whole story of modern American history is these moments where there was a lot of excitement and enthusiasm about the kind of new economy that entrepreneurs were creating. This is a rhetoric that's associated with the 1990s and the Clinton era, but you find similar versions of this idea, honestly, going back to the 1920s. But in succession, eventually, just the way that capitalism works, eventually those markets get oversaturated. There's a bust to accompany the boom, and so in that trough, what entrepreneurship is able to say is, well, we can do it again. Yeah, there's a way to it almost kind of validates the pain and the sense of precarity that people feel when that's happening, and but it sort of gives them an out again. I think that in sort of my own adulthood, I think about the way that in the response to the Great Depression or the Great Recession, which was a period of real sort of political upsurge, Occupy, Bernie. At the same time, this was really the boom years of the gig economy. A lot of people, trying to sort of get win the venture capital lottery. So these times when, again, people are sort of struggling economically, it's almost like there's a kind of divergent path, sort of two sort of roads that they can go down, and so one of them is a more kind of political, constructive way. But the fact that entrepreneurship, unlike other kind of ideologies that are more kind of like, I don't know, gaslight people, say no, there's actually there's nothing wrong, the economy is great, whatever. Entrepreneurship says no, actually, like your economic circumstances are really bad. You're not wrong to think that you're in trouble here, but there is a solution. And if you buy my book, or listen to my podcast or watch my YouTube video, I'll teach you the secret to how to make your own job.
Yeah. Lastly, Erik, can this kind of ecosystem exist if there was really a left alternative that didn't place the onus on individuals to uplift their own circumstances in a society that pretends that it's meritocratic? But I don't know. We solved it by eliminating DEI, so now Tucker Carlson's son can get hired for the VP slot, or Pete Hegseth, who earned it, can become the head of defense. So it seems to me that this is a marketplace that exists purely because we don't really have a left alternative that's messaging in that way or providing in that way.
Yeah, not only a left alternative, but there's a kind of cyclical, or a sort of vicious cycle where not only do you not, have that kind of left alternative for people to latch onto, but there's precisely because of the evisceration of the left in this country, there's also no social safety net. So that experience of precarity is really bad. If you're not, because we don't have Medicare for all, because losing your job is more devastating in the United States than it is in a lot of other countries. If you're unemployed, you don't have. Yeah, exactly. You kind of, so for a lot of people feel like, well, I can't sit around, maybe like organizing long term, there's a way to make things better, but in the short term, I gotta take care of myself, my family. And so, there's the entrepreneurship stuff provides the kind of glimmer of a short-term solution. And that can be really appealing, precisely because of the mess that we're in.
Well, Erik Baker, really appreciate your time today. The book is called Make Your Own Job, How the Entrepreneurial Work Ethic Exhausted America. We'll put a link to that down below wherever people are listening or watching this. Thanks so much for your time today.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Take care. All right, folks, quick break. And when we come back, we're going to be talking to Teresa Romero, president of the United Farm Workers. We are back, and we are joined right now by Teresa Romero, president of the United Farm Workers. Thanks so much for coming on the show today, Teresa.
Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, and by the way, congrats on the congressional medal, right? I mean, I saw that earlier when I was doing some research, so that's a high honor.
It definitely was. It definitely has, and you know what? To me, it was proof that President Biden saw farm workers, their struggles and their contributions.
Well, that's good to hear. We are in a very difficult time right now for farm workers in this country. Matt, I sent you that tweet from last week. United Farm Workers put out this image here. Basically, it seems like this threatening message was sent to multiple different locations. We're pulling this up here. Yeah. Multiple UFW union offices received this in the mail this week, and it says, report illegal aliens at schools, at work, at church, at restaurants, in your neighborhood. There is nowhere to hide. This was sent again to multiple locations. Trump's coming is what it says there. So I guess, Teresa, if you could just react to those threats, and we can take it from there.
It is inhumane. We are a country of immigrants. We're a country, all of us came from somewhere else. And the fact that we are terrorizing immigrants, but mostly immigrants of color, who contribute to our economy, who contribute to their communities, who have bought homes, who pay taxes, and are threatened like this, it should be illegal. But for sure, it's inhumane.
And what has the environment been like for farm workers since Trump took office earlier last week?
It is, like I said, they're being terrorized. They are afraid to even go to church, to go to the market, to buy food for their family. Children are afraid to go to school because they don't know if their mom and dad are going to be home when they get back. It has, two of our members were stopped. They were just driving home from work, and they were stopped by immigration. And two of them were detained, and within 24 hours, they were already in Mexico.
And can you speak about the United Farm Workers and how your union includes folks who are undocumented, right? And just some of the folks that are a part of your union, and how everybody is standing really in solidarity, but also in fear of this crackdown.
Absolutely. We all know that the only way that our workforce can be protected is having a union contract, because they're undocumented, they are abused to no end. They're threatened. They've been cases where they're sexually abused. And what we're trying to do is make sure that we protect them. And the best way to do it is with a union contract. But also we are doing sessions to inform not only farm workers, but our immigrant community of what their rights are. And they need to understand that, like anybody else, they have the right to an attorney. They have the right to not sign anything, not to say anything. Unfortunately, from what we have heard from workers who have been detained, they're intimidated. They're yelled at, they're threatened, to where they are forced to sign whatever they put in front of them. And this is not our legal system. And farm workers are being, not only farm workers, but immigrants of color are being targeted and intimidated.
Can you speak a bit about how the threat of deportation is used against farm workers, perhaps if they have complaints about their work environment or unsafe conditions or abuse? What are some of the stories you'd like our audience to know about how that is deployed?
We have had cases where workers, not under contract, but were brave enough to file a complaint. And one of the things that has happened in the past is that the attorneys for growers have called immigration. So before they enter the place we're going to testify, they're detained and they're deported. Farm workers who say, you have not paid me, I worked these many hours and you didn't pay me, they are fired. So they're not asking for more than the rights. Look, farm workers work under very difficult conditions. Here in California, we're having fires, and we're talking about it because it is in an area where it is heavily populated. But farm workers go through this every year. They work under dangerous conditions because the air quality is dangerous. It's horrible. They work under temperatures in California. The temperatures the last couple of years have gone to 120 degrees. There are states in our country that in the winter, it's very cold, and they continue to work, to put food on our tables.
And for children too, do you hear stories often of the abuse of child labor as well by maybe some of the employers that you're familiar with, that some of your members have had horrible experiences with?
Absolutely. We have even reached out to media to make sure that they really talk about these issues. There are different states. We need to remember that farm workers were excluded from the NLRB in the 1930s. So they do not have a right to organize and get a contract. I mean, they can organize, but the employers cannot give them, a contract that they deserve. There's only 2 states where farm workers have these rights, California and New York. So whatever happens in other states, the abuses that happen in other states, we report them. We call legislators on those states to make sure that if they have children. However, we also need to remember there's some states that allow children to work. It's starting at the age of 12. So they're not necessarily breaking the law, but we need to change those laws. We need to make sure that farm workers, their children, their families are protected. We have in California heat illness protections that growers are not enforcing. And farm workers die because of the high temperatures. And all we're asking for is access to water. We're asking for a 10-minute break every 2 hours if the temperatures are 95, in a shaded area for them to be able to rest. That's all we are asking for. That's what the regulations say here in California, and they're not implementing them.
And with this threat of deportation, this just emboldens these folks to essentially say, screw off. You want basic safety? We don't care, because we can just call ICE.
Exactly. And the hypocrisy of the growers, they know that they need this workforce. These workforce, farm workers, these men and women have been working in agriculture for 20, 30, 40 years. They're professionals, they're experienced, they depend on them. But although they know that they need this workforce, they're opposed a path to citizenship for farm workers. And during the previous Trump administration, we passed through Congress the Farm Workforce Modernization Act with Republican support. And we're going to introduce it again because these workforce, they are essential workers. They feed us every day. They're the backbone of agriculture, and they deserve to be treated with dignity and respect.
How do you think that we got to this point in America where, frankly, the immigration conversation has moved so far to the right? I mean, I feel that the Democrats have not done enough, frankly, to combat some of the real just like racism and horrific brutality that we're seeing from the Republicans, and now they're taking advantage of it.
Absolutely. And it is getting worse under this administration. I think Democrats can do more, and we're working with them to make sure that we get this bill introduced. It is the recognition of this workforce needs to be appreciated by everybody in this country, legislators, consumers, Republicans, Democrats, independents. We all need to understand that we are all immigrants. You and I, or our ancestors, came from somewhere else. So let's come together and do something for this workforce. Let's come together and do something for immigrants in general, who are, like I said earlier, contributing to this economy in the billions of dollars that they pay in taxes. So yes, I agree with you. A lot more needs to be done, and it has to come from both parties.
And you mentioned the consumer side of things. Can you speak a little bit about how in this election, grocery prices were a big part of the concerns of the voters, and Trump has tried to capitalize on that? And what this does for grocery prices because of how much our economy relies on these farm workers?
He absolutely capitalized on that. I agree with you 100%. The price of the products are not set by the workers. They're set by the big corporations and the big companies, and they're the ones that set the price higher, do not pay more to their employees, and their profits are higher. But I don't want to make this issue about the price of food. I really want to make this issue about the human pain, the human toil on immigrants, on their families. When I listen to a child, a 7-year-old, an 8-year-old, that tells me they don't want to go to school because they're afraid mom and dad are not going to be home when they get back, this is what happened. These children are U.S. citizens. So it is, for the consumers, I know it is about the price of food. Farm workers have No saying on that. So let's look at them as human beings.
Absolutely. And you mentioned some of those stories. What do you anticipate going forward? I know that's hard to even predict, but it just in terms of you're already seeing the pain that you describe, and it's been less than 2 weeks. So how bad can this get, and how bad is it right now?
It is bad, and it is going to get bad. Even if the deportations are slowed down, the fear and the threat of those deportations is going to be in the minds of immigrants, of children, of adults, and it's that is not going to change. Everything that they do, everything that they accept from employers, is going to be based on that fear. So the abuses are going to be greater. Their challenges are going to be greater. The fear that the children are growing under is going to be devastating. So even if the deportations slow down, the consequences are going to be greater.
And can you speak about the Trump administration's effort to categorize immigrants as criminals, both by just kind of saying it, even though they may be here under temporary protected status, or they may just be undocumented? But he's trying to blur the line just by having basically a civil violation of basically maybe not having your documentation into a level of criminality where he wants the photo op of them in cuffs off military planes or at Guantanamo Bay. I mean, that level of dehumanization is so deliberate. Yes. What's your reaction?
He has used that to demonize immigrants of color, because he is not going into white neighborhoods where I can guarantee you that there's going to be also immigrants, that they deserve also to be here. They deserve the right to be here. But he is demonizing immigrants of color. The majority of the crimes in this country are not committed by immigrants. The majority of the most difficult work in this country is done by immigrants. The majority of workers who suffer abuse by employers are immigrants. So the fact that he's demonizing, and it pains me and it angers me that many people are buying his lies. I'm an immigrant. I'm a U.S. citizen. And now I have to carry with me proof that I'm a U.S. citizen. Why? Because I'm brown. And I can be stopped at any time for whatever reason and detained if I cannot prove that I'm a U.S. citizen.
Lastly, Teresa, what would be your advice? Because I'm concerned about my neighbors here in New York City. Eric Adams is now basically openly begging for Donald Trump's pardon. So my assessment is that he's going to let him do raids in the city if he wants to. For folks that may not be in a state with a Democratic governor or in an area where they feel like they can be safe, and who knows what's safe at this point, it's the federal government. But what would be your advice to anybody listening to this who to save themselves if they can, or try to, yeah.
I want to make sure that people understand what their rights are. I want them to understand that, and I know it's difficult because fear controls what we do in many cases, but I want them to have and reach out to an attorney and have the name of that attorney with them. And if they're detained, that all they do is, this is my attorney, contact my attorney. I'm not going to talk to you. I'm not going to sign anything. Once they see a name of an attorney, I think their actions are, or I'm hoping that their actions are going to be different. But I want people to remember that they have rights, even if they're undocumented. And they need to enforce those rights to protect themselves and their families.
Well, really appreciate your time today, Teresa. If you can support the United Farm Workers, please do. And if you're listening to this and you think you may be subject to some of these deportation policies, please take Teresa's advice. Thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Emma, for having me. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. With that, folks, we're going to wrap up the free part of this program and head into the fun half, where we'll be taking your calls, reading your IMs, all of that. We have so much news, obviously. We haven't even gotten to the RFK hearings currently, the Cash Patel hearings.
He got into it with Bernie Sanders, saying Bernie was owned by Big Pharma, and because Bernie, of course, doesn't take any money from pharma, PACs, or anything like that, but workers in any industry, including pharma, support Bernie. So that's where RFK made that point. And I think that's actually a really useful way to differentiate my critique or our critique of farmers, big pharma versus the crank, afraid of needles idiots that RFK is corralling like livestock.
Do you have that available? Did he tweet it or something? RFK?
There's an exchange. We can play it in the fun half on the other side of it.
We should. Yeah, the guy. There might not be an industry that's more opposed, that would have been more opposed to the presidency of Bernie Sanders than the healthcare industry, given his Medicare for All proposal.
Jimmy Dore and ism and RFK-ism is an op. It is a psy-op, actually, that is protecting pharma, because the real thing that pharma wanted to protect in the past 4 years, and the real problem that, say, the third world developing countries have with our pharmaceutical companies, is the protection of the IP for these new vaccine technologies. It is not that the vaccine technologies are actually secretly killing you. You idiots. You goddamn idiots. It is because they want to protect IP and monopolize it so that they can continue raking in the financial reward of that. And all of this, we need to look into Fauci and stuff like that, that even like Taibbi's doing. I haven't watched the Tucker thing yet, but I imagine it's disgraceful. But I'll watch it this weekend. All that stuff is an op for all of these. That's why they are proximal to venture capitalists. It's all the exact same financial parasites that want the markets to continue, the equity markets to continue being really useful for people to make passive income. Bernie Sanders would have, like, the Bernie Sanders approach would have made these sorts of things publicly available to the world, because guess what? They did save lives. They should have been applied more. And it's funny, like, I mean, I'm going a little bit on.
No, I
got a lot of opinions on this stuff too. Like the RFK saying, why did so many Americans die from COVID? It's because we wanted to get them back to work, Bobby, because we're laissez-faire. And we said, okay, you know what China did? Locked that shit down. Okay, they lied to it. They lied about a lot of the stuff in the early part of it. There's not great communication transparency in a place like China. Nonetheless, they eventually came around and started going after that virus in a way we didn't. And so we killed a lot of people. And Bobby just wants to point out, like, it's you fat pores.
Yeah.
You fat pores that aren't, because ultimately what Bobby and why Bobby Kennedy isn't pushing Medicare for all, and why Jimmy Dore now from his giant house in California isn't pushing Medicare for all, is because it costs too much to cover your obese or your diseased ass, and they don't want to pay the tax.
It is, honestly, totally consistent with him being one of these weird, rich, old, like, you know, aristocratic guys that sees health as like a series of like personal consumptive choices, because he's never had to make a decision that would have affected him getting any health care. So
he can get his health care. It's clear.
Yeah.
You can look at him and see he's getting whatever health care he wants.
Oh, so yeah, I mean, truly looks like, well, maybe I'll save my cracks about his leathery appearance for the fun half. Matt, what's happening on Left Reckoning?
Left Reckoning, we had a jam-packed show on Tuesday. Grace Blakely talking about economics, who's one of my favorite speakers on economics, and Asal Rod, who we've had in a number of times talking about the Middle East stuff. Great episodes. And in the post game, we had where's my? Oh, we had yes. That's not the post game. Neil Meyer talking about Democrats, and every time they lose an election, trying to, and scary to me, less and less convincingly, seem as stewards of the working class. And I would just say, like, if you're pointing out, hey, look at this new comms shop that helps Democrats, including Bernie and also Greg Kassar, do working class messaging. I would ask, what other kind of class messaging have we been doing? And should we just maybe not do any of that? And maybe every comms messaging organization should be a working class messaging point. But anyway, yeah, it's Neil Meyer, patreon.com/Left Reckoning to get access to that.
All right. And on ESPN, Bradley and I, no OT today because no games for the NFL, but you can check out our episode where we talked about the conference championships and talked a little bit about the upcoming Super Bowl, youtube.com/ESPN show. All right, we'll bring in Brandon and Binder in the fun half. We have Brandon? No Binder yet.
No Binder yet. Let me see if I can get Brandon on.
Hello, quick. Brandon. Let's go.
Go.
God, that joke's already old.
Get rid of that.
I gotta stop.
It's great.
What's the joke?
Let's go, Brandon.
It's less of a joke and more of a misunderstanding, I suppose.
Look, I'm
Actually,
still referencing
about
30 Rock, so.
It's probably about this time 8 years ago that we had Fuck Donald Trump, that song come out, FDT.
I don't
Fuck
remember
Donald
that.
Trump. You don't remember that? Who was that came out with that? Is that YG? No.
Maybe it was YG. That sounds like YG. I think that was YG.
Yeah, it's a good song. I'll put that back in my workout playlist.
I like Donald Trump by Mac Miller. That one's a good one. It's not as anti-Donald Trump, but it's a good song.
Well, he ended up I like that song a lot too. That's on my workout playlist. But even though it is pro Donald Trump back, but then he became very anti when he, it just Trump used to be substitute for rich guy in like songs and in movies. It's a huge part of his cultural resonance today.
It's the funniest thing when a DeSantis thinks like, oh, I can be the Donald Trump. It's like, okay, get referenced in 1,000 rap songs.
Right.
You might have a chance.
Right.
It was YG featuring Nipsey Hussle.
Oh, Nipsey Hussle.
R.I.P.
What's he been up to these days?
Nipsey Hussle's dead.
Died.
Oh, died. Right. That's why I knew. Oh my God. I
Could you
wasn't
imagine
a joke.
Could you imagine DeSantis in a Home Alone movie? Could you imagine like Ron DeSantis in like Home Alone 3? He'd be one of the wet bandits.
Yeah.
Yeah, he has like the flop sweat. He'd be one of the wet bandits for sure.
All right, guys. The number is 646-257-3920. Maybe we'll see Binder in the fun half. We will see. Oh, wait. Maybe. What's happening on the discourse, Brandon? Sorry.
Oh, yeah. So we have a new episode out on the Patreon, revisiting Biden's legacy, talking about what we expect of the Donald Trump administration. And then obviously I've been streaming and I'll be streaming tomorrow. I guess we'll probably go over the RFK hearings. So, it'll be a good time.
That sounds fun.
That sounds fun. I'm sorry. I just can't believe it. Oh, God. The fact that we're going to have to play that and hear that guy's damn voice. We try our best. All right. Number is 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Okay, Emma, please.
Well, I feel that my voice is sorely lacking on the majority report.
Wait, look, Sam is unpopular.
I do deserve a vacation at Disney World. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome Emma to the show.
It is Thursday.
Yeah, I think you need to take over for Sam.
Yes, please.
No. I'm gonna pause you right there.
Wait, what?
You can't encourage Emma to live like this. And I'll tell you why. She was offered a tour, sushi, and poker with the boys. Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys. She was offered a tour, sushi, and poker with the boys.
What?
Tour, sushi, and poker.
Tim's upset?
Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys. She was offered a tour, sushi, and...
that's what we call it in the biz.
Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys.
Right.
Tour, sushi, and poker.
We're gonna get demonetized.
I just think that what you did to Tim Pool was mean.
Free speech.
That's not what we're about here. Look at how sad he's become now. You shouldn't even talk about it because I think you're responsible.
I probably am in a certain way, but let's get to the meltdown here.
Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys.
Oh my God.
Tour,
wow.
Sushi. I'm sorry, I'm losing my fucking mind. She was offered a tour, sushi, and poker with the boys.
Logic.
Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys. Boy. Tour.
I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a kid.
Tour.
I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a little kid.
I had this debate 7,000 times.
A little kid. I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a kid.
Tour. I'm losing my fucking mind.
Some people just don't understand.
So I'm not trying to be a dick right now, but like I absolutely think the U.S. should be providing me
with wife and kids.
That's not what we're talking about here. Okay, all right.
It's not a fun job. Tour?
That's a real thing. That's a real thing. Real thing.
Willy Wonka tour?
That's a real thing. That's a real thing.
Real what's that offered a tour?
That's a real thing. That's a real thing. Real thing. That's a real thing. That's a real thing. Real thing.
What's that offered a tour?
Ladies and gentlemen, Joe Rogan has done it again.
That offered a tour?
That's a real thing. That's a
Poker with the boys.
I think he might be blowing it out of proportion.
real thing. That's a
Poker with the boys. That offered a tour?
That's a real thing. That's a
Poker.
Let's go, Joey.
Tour? Sushi and poker with the boys.
Take it easy, Blake.
Tour? Sushi and poker.
Things have really gotten out of hand.
Sushi and poker with the boys.
Delusional.
Tour?
Deluded.
Sushi.
You don't have a clue as to what's going on. Live YouTube.
Sam has like the weight of the world on his shoulders. Sam doesn't want to do this show anymore. It was so much easier when the Majority Report was just you. You were happy.
Let's change the subject.
Right.
Rangers and Knicks are doing great.
Now shut up. You don't want people saying reckless things on your program.
That's
Now,
one of the most difficult parts about this show.
This is a pro-killing podcast.
I'm thinking maybe it's time we bury the hatchet.
Left is best. Violet.
Tour?
Don't be foolish and don't fucking tweet at me and don't binge. The way Emma has cucked all of these people, love it.
That's where my heart is. So I wrote my honors thesis about it.
Oh,
Sorry,
she
finance.
wrote an honest thesis. I guess I should hand the main mic to you now.
You are to the right of me on foreign policy.
We already fund Israel, dude. Are you against that?
That's a tougher question I have an answer to.
Incredible theme song.
Hi, Bumbler.
Emma Vigeland, absolutely one of my favorite people. Actually, not just in
We
the
are back, folks. We are back. It is the fun half, and we're here with one Brandon Sutton.
I'm here. I'm here, folks.
Say hello. Here we go. I'm going to open up the phone line, 646-257-3920. Alex G's Treehouse. My son is nonverbal and has autism, but Mark Andreessen was on a podcast, and he told the interviewer they were going to stop funding disability benefits because it's mostly just college kids trying to get meds and skip classes. I'm so relieved to find out my son is just faking it, and I'm excited to see him pick himself up by his bootstraps and get his shit together.
Yeah, again, Mark Andreessen got basically his first money from taking public or I guess marketing something that was developed at a university, and I think it was Netscape, right? And then making that public. And these are the eggheads. Which is what primitive accumulation is the Marxist term for this sort of thing. That get to decide all this stuff. A lot of the same guys that just decided, like PayPal. How many billionaires were made from PayPal? And everyone knew that eventually there need to be some sort of internet way to pass money along. And they were just the ones that got there first. And now you get like all sorts of different freaks that get to run the world.
Right, exactly. Sandman, stub my toe. Thanks, DEI.
I still say thanks Obama. Do you guys ever find yourself going thanks Obama like anytime anything bad happens? Yeah, I do it all the time. Like, yeah, thanks Obama. Like, yeah.
Right. Yeah, that does. And I mean, but Trumpism unfortunately has trumped all of those. Like, there's so many little just phrases that Trump has just made sad, or like all of his little isms, I feel like have even more staying power than any of that stuff from the Obama era.
I think Trump's like character traits, like his like personality traits, like are more bombastic, but some of like the best like conservative memes came out of the Obama administration. Like that's when they were first dipping their toes into being like, deeply insane.
Right, which it was mostly Michelle Obama being a man.
People
right?
act like there's some sort of devolution, and the real reality is that we just get it in 4K as opposed to like 720p.
Yeah,
that we got in the Obama administration, because the amount of like she's a man or Obama, the birth certificate thing, like insane.
Dick Cheney as Brat said, I think we need to tie a lot of the current immigration policy back to Obama, starting with Homan. Obama gave him the Presidential Rank Award in 2015. I did not even know that. I mean, Homan just talks like a guy that's like a freaking Gestapo. How can a Democratic administration reward that kind of guy? But
you gotta get tough.
I'm sure he helped, with that Obama's many deportations.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that being tough on immigration with Obama was like tough on crime. It was like showing, it was the Obama administration showing that it was okay for you to vote for him over like the Republicans, because he was going to be just as tough on crime, and also the drone war, right? So like his foreign policy was very kinetic and, conservative.
Right.
I also think the rivalrous way, I think there is a rise in nativism. I don't think it's necessary. Like, I think the sentiment was going pro-immigrant actually in the past year or so, but to the extent there's more anti-immigrant sentiment now than there was in 2008, 2009, it's because we haven't done anything to address the fundamental inequality in this country, and mobility is getting worse and worse, and the rich people are getting richer and richer. So you're basically turning the temperature up on all this stuff, and we're going to see, until we address things like rent prices and how indebted people are, I think we're going to see more and more of these pathologies, whether it's misogyny, whether it's racism, nativism, get worse and worse.
I mean, liberalism is on its, on death's door, essentially. The alternative has not, the Republicans have very aggressively and effectively presented their alternative vision for the country and for the world. And liberals are unable to do that because they're a coalition of everybody that's just like not the fascists. And
also some fascists too.
Fair.
Zionist.
I mean, Biden did just is a liberal and also
it's a big tent.
Genocide. So
it's a big tent. It's a big tent because there's a lot of clowns in it. So.
Yeah. All right, let's take a call really quickly. Calling from a 970 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I think, though, you have us on speaker, which is a cardinal sin.
Is that better?
Somehow it's worse.
Oh no, I'm driving. That's why.
It's all right then. Just be careful and keep it quick, please.
For sure. I just am. This is Leo calling from California. I called earlier this week, and I just wanted to give a quick shout out to every federal worker because the news hasn't been covering it super well. It is not a buyout. You have to keep working until September. Because I've seen, you can read the NPR article about it. There's a lot of lawyers who are talking about it, but it is not a federal buyout. And I just wanted to give a quick shout out to all the other federal workers out there who are listening. Don't think that you don't have to work. You have to work, and then you just have no protection. All
right.
So just be careful out there.
Thanks for the heads up, Leo. Have a good one.
Have a nice one.
You too. All right. Let's actually. Okay. You want to do 8 here? So Donald Trump has announced, and he did this after signing the Laken-Riley Act, which allows for police and other law enforcement to essentially detain and deport people who are here and don't have permanent citizenship if they're charged with a crime, not convicted, charged. And it also empowers state attorneys general to essentially subvert the federal government if they want to and engage in some of like the deportation activities as well. Although I don't know if that's going to really be a problem for them with the Trump administration, and they're going to be working with them in lockstep. So when he signed this law, Trump basically announced that he wants to